Kelsey, I'm so excited to have you today. How are you doing?
I am feeling incredible. It's sunny here and I'm in Vancouver and it's also known as Raincouver. So to see the sunshine is like just filling my heart and I'm always that type of person that says, if you don't see the sunshine, be the sunshine. But today I see it, so I'm gonna thrive off of its energy.
I love that. I love that. And you've been someone I've wanted on the podcast. I've been following you on social. I actually do your workouts on YouTube. I am someone who is a fan and have friends who are a fan. And when I reached out to you, you said, "Oh, this is perfect. I know all about this topic." You said, "I'm a burned out Black woman from time to time. I'm always navigating burnout and overcoming it." And so I think I want to start there because I think that's very relatable. I think people who listen to this podcast they thought the same thing. And so tell me about what burnout means for you, how you've experienced it, how you're navigating it.
Yeah, for this podcast, it wasn't a yes, it was a hell yes. Like, I think I found a podcast that was created with me in mind. So, yeah, when I got the invitation, I was just like, I'm all in. This is a topic I feel like I'm now an expert in, having been an entrepreneur now for the last 14 years. I've navigated burnout in multiple stages of my life, whether that be um, career related, whether that be relationship related, whether that be family related, or just like the burnout of always trying to just be better. I don't know that that gets talked about a lot, and maybe some of you listening out there will relate to that. But just like that constant need to constantly be like getting better and growing and bettering ourselves and like the self-help books and just like always wanting to be better. It can also be exhausting in and of itself. So yeah, I'm excited today to kind of share some insight on just some of the things that I've learned over the course of these last, 30 years that I've been on earth. I feel like maybe some of you can also relate to the fact that I can say I felt like I was a burnt out child. Um,
Yeah.
so this has just been like an ongoing thing and it's actually become kind of my way of life. And I don't no, don't take it what I'm saying and internalize that as something you should be doing. I say do the opposite. I'm looking as a 34-year-old woman to try to navigate how to break that cycle, really. And when I kind of opened up the can of worms and I continue to keep growing and working on myself as you do, I recognize that the feeling of burnt out is something that I don't only hold individually, but I see it generationally throughout my family. I see it ancestrally for throughout being historically throughout history as being a black woman. I see it how we're feeling collectively right here, right now, from one continent to the next. And, it's helpful to know that because sometimes it can feel very isolating and alone. Like everybody is taking a million steps ahead, especially when we look online at our highlight reel of social media. It can really feel like you're falling behind. So, if you're feeling that way, know that there's not just you, it's definitely all of us together. And even for everybody that came before us.
I love that. And this, everybody, is why I had Kelsey on today, because that is honestly the impetus of creating the podcast is the fact that we really feel a lot of times this generational weight of what's come before us, and that it is kind of steeped in this belief that it's all about struggle or about overcoming. And how do we get out of that? And how do we opt into what really our ancestors would want with us, our generations before us would want for us, which is this joy and abundance kind of mindset, which I think you try to navigate and put out there, but are very transparent. And thank you for that about the fact that burnout is very much, I like when you said a burned out child, because I feel like a lot of people feel that there has never been a moment where they haven't been wrestling with burnout. Maybe they're not in it, but they're wrestling not to fall back in it again. And how they have felt that this has been something that has been ongoing. And so I think you have really illuminated for the audience, like really shined a light in the fact that you're not alone. And so many people come on here and be like, I'm working on it. And you're like, look, I'm in it. I felt it since a kid. I'm trying to navigate out of it. Don't do what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I
Exactly. I have lots to share in terms of what I've experienced, but also like things that I've learned that once you know better, you try to do better. And you're right. It's something that, to kind of scale back and maybe just share a little bit about why I feel like I was a burnt out kid is I have been an athlete my entire life. I started playing softball, I think, when I was 6 years old. I'd always been extremely athletic. I played every school sport from elementary, middle school, and high school, basketball, volleyball. And I'm only 5'2". Okay. I'm going to preface this and say I'm 5'2". I was not excelling necessarily at like the basketball and the volleyball, but I played and I just had this kind of genuine athleticism. And I know from an early age that other people saw it in me as well, especially people that I had looked up to, like coaches, adults, role model figures. They saw early on that I had this passion and drive for being an athlete, and that, I was somebody who really could excel in sports. And so that combined with like this innate desire to compete and to be the best and to have to prove myself, um, and to really prove to people that what they saw was real. I always felt like I had to go above and beyond. That, I was always that kid that took those extra batting lessons. I, did extra work behind the scenes to always try to improve myself and to stay at the top of my game. And, I'm so fortunate, and it did benefit me in a huge way that eventually when I got older, I was awarded a full ride softball scholarship to college. And I mean, it was incredible. However, I will say that as, a 34-year-old woman now, that transition from, coming out of college, and I was a college dropout, I will say that eventually that caught up to me. That drive to be the best led me to my first kind of bout of depression. But looking back now, I've realized that nobody kind of prepares you for that transition out of kind of adolescence and into early adulthood. And so I continue to keep kind of applying that same narrative and that same story of having to work hard and be the best and number one, whether that was in the gym as an adult or whether that was within my career as an adult. And I think that continued to keep me burnt out up until I'm currently still working on it. Okay.
That's okay. We're all working on it. And I can see so many people relating. I relate to what you're saying. Maybe not in athletics. I was not an athletic kid, but you know what? I would love to give you like a virtual hug because I'm 5'1" and I don't meet a lot of people who are like in the petite girlies, but club. But as a woman, and particularly as a Black woman, I think we're constantly wrestling with this, trying to be better, trying to prove something, trying to excel. I meet people every day that's their inner narrative. And there's
Mhm.
benefits to that, right? When you are pushing yourself and you are excelling, you are going to be a standout. You're going to be successful. But the cost of that, right, is that it can lead to burnout. It can lead to depression because our standard and metric is off, right? What we think is excellent is somebody else's through to the moon. It's perfection,
Yeah.
right? And what we think is just okay is somebody else's. That's amazing. And we lose sight of that, I think, as Black women, partially because like history telling us that, you're
Yeah.
not good enough at being great, but then we kind of internalize that and keep it going. And I think
Yeah.
particularly I'm interested to talk to you because the body is like the place where we store all those things, but it's also where we keep perfectionism going or giving up on perfectionism because like that's the swing, right? It's like I'm going full
Definitely.
force, I'm doing absolutely nothing. And people are on these two extremes. And so how did you come to wellness as your calling? How did you translate this athleticism and your background into something a little bit different, right? You're not teaching people to be
Yeah.
athletes, you're teaching people to be well. How did you pivot?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, it took a number of years, that's for sure. I think dealing with my own kind of underlying perfectionism that I didn't really identify as perfectionism at the time that led me to some disordered eating behaviors and just, this over exercising, very restrictive, very rigid training, diet kind of lifestyle, and how it translated into my work as a personal trainer when I left college. And I eventually found what I wanted to do, and which I'm still doing after 14 years. But like you said, it's really evolved over the years as I've grown more mature, as I've learned to really become in tune with my body as I learned self compassion and how to give myself grace to try not to be everything to everybody. Because I think you nailed it when you said, like, especially Black women, like historically, it's felt like we've had to work twice as hard for half as much. And you can't just be average, mediocre Black woman. You have to be exceptional all the time to get any level of recognition, to feel any sense of accomplishment, and to feel validated and seen. And I think that in of itself is what ultimately leads to the burnout that's in that underlying level. So we do things like try to cope with that feeling of inadequacy and that imposter syndrome and that constant feeling of low self-worth and not enough by trying to manipulate aspects in our life that we feel like we can have some control over. And for me, that was my body, that was dieting, that was exercise. I felt like, okay, I may not have control over X, Y, and Z, but at least I can control what I put in my body, what I can eat. And I maybe abused that ability a little too much in that I also used it to manipulate myself to try to shrink myself into something that I felt was worthy to be seen by other people. And, going through that experience, coming out of the other side of it and learning to find peace and joy in my body at every stage that it's kind of been through since then, has allowed me to really drive home and to feel at home and of myself, and then to help guide others towards having that same healthy relationship with body and movement and eating.
That's so beautiful. And that really is what we're here to talk about today. And I love that you set the stage by talking about who you are, because this is why I could have a lot of people on here to talk about movement and talk about body. I wanted you because you reflect us. Like, I see us, I see the audience in you. You are one of us. You are a person who I think really relates to the messaging. And that's what needs to be said, is because we are all probably not taking care of our bodies the way we need to, because the body is kind of, I tell people, it's the last place we come home to, even though we're living in it all the time. You don't discover ourselves emotionally or physically. And so there's times where we're just not treating our bodies the way it should, whether it's over exercising, over abusing our bodies, restricted eating, or it's the other side where people don't know where to begin and they don't see taking care of their body as a joyful thing. They think about chronic illness or pain or disease. All these are negative words that make you avoidant about your body and avoidant about
Definitely.
celebrating it and nurturing it. And so, how did you begin to come up with this concept? I think I want to ask that last. And then when we come back, I want to move us into how people can join this movement that you really are embodying. So, how did you come to having this discussion about helping Black women and women in general, people in general have a good relationship with their body?
Yeah. Um, you said something really, really important, and I want to kind of highlight it and even add a little bit to it, which is this fact that people can feel very dissociated from their body. And the reason for that can be a number of different factors. A lot of it can be from, trauma. It can be from, experiences in some way that really helped you to shut down a part of yourself that you didn't feel like the world deserved to see. And a big part of the conversation that I think is often left out, is this not idea, this reality that our world keeps us constantly engaged, turned on, stimulated all of the time. And it is
Yes.
extremely difficult to recognize and to be in your body and to sense physiologically, to sense emotionally what you need in each moment, because we are constantly distracted. And so creating those moments to have downtime, to have time to just allow yourself to be and to experience exactly what you're feeling in every moment without trying to quell it, without trying to cope, without trying to distract yourself, I think for most people is the first step, because most of us don't even know what we need. And we can't even hear what we need. And sadly, we don't notice what we need until the whisper becomes a roar. And that can turn into things like chronic health conditions, where now we have this huge wake up call where we're like, wow, I feel like now I need to undo 20 years of work that I was not listening to myself. And then we feel overwhelmed, we feel exhausted by the thought of even having to do that, and we never even take that first step to start. So creating space, I think for me was kind of the beginning point to start to look at things with maybe a little bit more skepticism and less internalization of me being the problem, and to really ask myself, like, why do I feel this way? And it's not just me, it's everybody. It's other black women too. So it can't just be something that's inherently wrong with me. This I have to look at as maybe something more systemic, something that's more institutionalized, something that is bigger than just me, because I feel like I'm carrying this weight for something that I don't deserve to be carrying. And for me, that really opened the door to start to look at how, you know, marginalized identities in particular are constantly up and battling against, institutionalized and intersectional racism within the medical industry, within wellness, within spaces, in every avenue of life. And it's no wonder we're tired. It's no wonder we're distracted. It's no wonder why we are constantly running from ourselves, And so, I guess kind of to come back to what you were asking, really the first stage and kind of my awareness was taking time to step out of being in just me having this issue and starting to have conversations with other people and being like, "Hey, yeah, you're feeling that way too? Shit, like maybe maybe it's not just me. Maybe we need to look at the bigger picture." And once you do that, you realize, "Oh my goodness, there is no going back. This is not a burden I need to be carrying, and now I want to share that with other people to help them be lifted out of that same experience."
I agree. That is beautiful, and we're gonna leave it here because I want to jump into what you've led us to. Is you use this phrase living wholeheartedly, and I want to touch on what that means to you, and then dive right into how we can have better relationships with our bodies in the way we move them and the way we treat them. So more to come with Kelsey Ellis. We're already off to an incredible start. We are going to keep talking with you and finding out more about how to better take care of ourselves in our bodies.